3, 2, 1. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Grande Prairie City Council Committee of the Whole meeting for July 14th, 2020. This is a special meeting where Council is acting like a committee to discuss Revolution Place renovation options. As directed by Council, Administration has prepared a number of different options that we are going to review this afternoon. Any decisions or direction in this forum would ultimately need to be approved by Council, because Council is acting here as a committee, not as a regular Council. We do have one Council member that's not able to join us today, and that's Councillor Clayton. We have one Council member that will be signing in while the meeting's in progress, and that's Councillor Minhas. And I think other than that, everybody's here and ready to go. So I think, Arlen, Director Miller, I'll pass it to you first to give a little bit of context and introduction, and then I'll let you send it over to your team.
All right. Thanks, Mayor Given, and good afternoon, Council, and thanks for your time this afternoon. So this, as you already stated, this is follow-up to previous discussions that we've had with Council about potential renovations for Revolution Place and the Bose Centre. So we're excited this afternoon to provide additional options. We have a few things for Council to consider, and one is a less expensive option, and then one is certainly a more expensive option, but we think we're hopeful that we provided enough information in the report that Council can make an informed decision. Another option is to ask for additional information, of course, and then Administration would certainly be willing to do that. But we do have Ms. Ridgway with us, and she's the expert on this, so if it's okay with Council, I'll turn it over to her.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm just going to share my screen here with you guys. Oh, am I able to share my screen, Shane? There we go. There we are. Is everybody seeing that okay? Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so thank you, Mayor Given and the rest of Council. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to continue the conversation around the next steps for Revolution Place. Okay, so Administration recommends the committee receive this report for information. The committee was directed Administration to bring forward to Council Committee of the Whole additional information on option number 2 and option number 3. So just to recap option number 2 for everybody again, option number 2 is a smaller renovation that expanded on the lobby space into the plaza. This would increase the number of entries within the building, and it would separate the entrances again for the Bose Event Center and the arena, which would alleviate a lot of congestion that we have in our lobby. It also had the addition of a loading dock on the west side of the building, along with the addition of 3 luxury suites on the east end of the arena. This will increase revenue for the building and provide services for our corporate sponsors. Design Works has created a preliminary drawing and design for us, and it's attached in the report for you to look through. For the financial analysis, Turcon has estimated the project at $4 million. The debt servicing for $4 million over 15 years is approximately $310,000 annually. So when we combine the debt servicing payments along with the municipal contribution, the city would be paying approximately $2 million annually for the project. The option will enhance guest experience for sure, yet it has a minimal impact on the revenue potential for the venue. Option number 3 was looking at the full renovation and revitalization of Revolution Place. It was extending the facility out to the east into the parking lot and onto the plaza. It also had infill to create a second level concourse so that the arena could be accessible 360 degrees along the top of the bowl. Some of the highlights from option number 3 were the 5,000 seats and 20 suites, which offers additional revenue potential and would allow us to compete within the market. The loading dock and reconfiguration of the change rooms will see greater efficiencies on show days and lower our staffing costs. Also enhancing the storm amenities will be a key feature in their recruiting and retention of top hockey talent. We also have the separation of the lobbies for the arena and the Bose Event Center, which will give us greater control on event day. increasing the square footage in the Vosges Event Center, along with the addition of breakout rooms for conferences. This is a key area where we really could capitalize on market potential. Premium conference space is lacking within the city's limits, and there's a demand for conferences that we could fill. We currently turn away between 3 to 5 conferences annually because we just don't have the amenities to accommodate them. Lastly, the project has an expanded kitchen, which would elevate our catering, leading to greater revenue projections. Our current concession space limits the amount and types of catering that our providers can give to clients, so expanding those options would be beneficial. So for the financial analysis, I was working with Ian McKay, Architect Inc. This is the same staff that have helped us develop the 2002 and 2013 venue plans. The recommended estimate for a full project is $55 million without phasing. That's up 12% from 2013. A full narrative from IMA is attached in the report. So the need remains, but the price continually increases. I feel the scope of the project could be reworked to hit a desired budgetary level, but trade-offs would have to be made. And the expert opinion on this project is to budget $55 million for a project of this scope. So for debt servicing on $55 million over 30 years, is approximately $2.7 million annually. So when we combine that debt service payment along with the projected municipal contribution with more revenue lines, will equate to $3.2 million annually over 30 years. So economic development graciously put together some numbers of economic impact potential with the addition of fixed seats and expansion of the Vosges Event Center. We are estimating annual average economic impact of $5 million. Yet on years that we could secure a large-scale sporting tourism event, for example, the Briar, that number can easily jump over $10 million. A renovated Revolution Place would be a significant economic driver in the downtown core. So here's a graph comparable. We just put this up to illustrate the gap between Revolution Place and our competitors, especially when it comes to suites. Suites are a huge revenue line within venues, and it creates connections between the venue and corporate community, which in turn leads to more sponsorship dollars and advertising dollars. So the importance of these spaces cannot be overlooked. With only 2 suites, we are limited to what we can offer our corporate community. And again, this graph puts into context our need for more fixed seats and premium seating options and how difficult it is for us to compete within the market. Procurement recommends a 2-step process if we were to go ahead with a large-scale project: an RFP for services of a cost consulting firm, and an RFP for an architect engineering firm to provide design works within the allocated budget. And the tender process is estimated to be completed within 4 weeks. So alternatives to consider, we could defer option number 2 or 3 to the 2020 budget discussions in the fall. We could look at approving option number 3 at a set budgetary level, or approving option number 2 at the $4 million. So it's clear Revolution Place has hit a plateau with our potential revenue expectations. In order to capitalize on market potential and increase the economic impact of the city, a renovation is required. That being said, all of the financial projections listed in the report are based on events and entertainment being back to full capacity. I cannot in good conscience say that I know when industry will be back up to its full potential. Therefore, there is a high level of risk associated with this project. I do know that when events return, they will be in high demand, and artists will be looking to do extensive touring. This is how they make their money. I'm sure they will be open to the opportunity of more dates, which will open up some opportunities for Grande Prairie. So in this case, a high risk comes with potential for high reward, but when we will start to see the economic benefits of our investment is still very uncertain, and with a number of contributing factors. So I'm happy to take any questions you may have. We also have Rebecca Lee here with Economic Development and Lori Gadet with Procurement to answer any specific questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Ms. Go ahead, Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. I might have more questions in a minute, but first, could I ask to see a slide again? You had that slide up real quick with different options, and I think those might have been some slightly different options than were in the report. Can you show that to me again? Thank you.
Okay. Move that. Move that. These alternatives?
Great, yes, thank you.
Okay.
While you're looking at that, Councillor Bressie, I saw Councillor Palat.
Yeah, and I got what I needed from that, so I don't need to see it anymore. Thank you.
Coming on, Chair. Okay.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Just a question. Just around there, there was a slide that was showing about a $5 million economic benefits if we were to do this. Can you give me an idea what it would do to the operations of Revolution Place? Like, it's going to cost us about $3.2 million annually to debt service it, but is there going to be an additional cost to operate, or would we actually see enough revenue that it would be in the black, or do we have a number on that, Catherine?
Yeah, so that is in the operational analysis in the report. There wouldn't be a significant increase in staffing. So the levels of revenue come up quite significantly, but that debt servicing also comes up. So there will still be a municipal contribution for sure.
Okay, so the $3.2 million was all in. Okay, sorry, my bad. Thank you.
Yeah, so Catherine, can you just confirm that as I'm looking through the report? So if I'm jumping to post-reno year one, in the smaller scale renovation, I see total expenses at $2.58 million. That's where I should be looking? And then in the large scale renovation, post-reno year one, I see $2.53 million.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually looks like the expenses are slightly higher on the smaller renovation. Can you talk about that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gibbon. We do see some efficiencies with our event days changeovers, especially with the changing of the dressing rooms. We would bring down quite a few operational costs there. That's why you're seeing a slight difference.
Okay, so just, obviously maybe I'm driving home a point here, but so the operational cost, excluding debt servicing, is slightly lower because of the efficiencies that are gained from the larger renovation.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Platt.
I'm just wondering on the option number 2, Catherine, if there was an appetite for $4 million, because who knows where this is going, is it broken out into how much was loading dock, how much was luxury suites, and how much was front entry? I think those are the big 3 with the option. Is it specifically broke out if we said we just want to do the loading dock and nothing else? Is it scalable like that?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Yes, in the Turcon estimate, they do have it broken out per project. Yeah.
Catherine, I had a couple. One, you sort of referenced that it would be possible to do a larger scale renovation at a smaller amount by doing some design trade-offs and potentially forgoing some parts. So what is your, what were you thinking of there, or what's the concept?
Well, I was speaking with IMA about maybe doing some trade-offs, but they were really not open to that. They really feel that a project of this scale should be budgeted at $65 million. We could explore that a little bit greater detail on what would need to be cut to bring it down to a certain budgetary level.
I guess from your building operations perspective, is there something that you see as being a not at this time kind of part of that larger renovation? And just for context, I actually dug out the old report from 2002 because I had it sitting downstairs. But I have seen the facility have renovations over time. The expanded lighting grid, the changes to the bowl to use the upper concourse on the south side. So there have been improvements over time that sort of lead to an overall plan. I guess from your operational perspective, are there ones that are more priority than other? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I think some changes within the plan for the vosges to minimize some of the costs, the elevation of the roof and things like that could maybe be foregone. Also, the 360 accessibility within the bowl, which I think is fantastic, but there's a potential to maybe cut the extension on the west side and just keep it as the U. Could see some savings there.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Any other
Any
questions?
other question?
Yeah, Councilor Preston.
Great, thank you. I've got two questions. One is about the potential skyboxes, and so I just see stairs in the rendering. Has there been any examination of if it's possible to make it accessible to people with mobility issues, and if so, what that would cost, if it's even possible?
Thank you, Mayor Given. Yes, we have had those discussions with Design Works and Turcon, and it is definitely possible to get a lift into that space. The cost could be extensive. Yeah.
Great. And then I think so, showing my hand a little bit, I think that the one significant renovation that I can maybe support is the modification to the loading bay. And then when it comes to larger renovations, showing my hand again, my take is maybe doable, but probably not yet. I'm wondering if the loading bay was done now, is that compatible with, if council invested a couple $100,000 in the loading bay now, would that be compatible with the $55 million plan if council decides to go forward with future renovations in 5 or 10 years? Or if we did that loading bay now, would that be throwaway costs if we did the larger renovation later?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I wouldn't recommend going ahead with it if we are looking to a larger scale renovation down the line, especially in that back of house area. It's really tight. As soon as we start making modifications, it limits what we're going to be able to do later on, especially when we reconfigure all of this change room.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? I had one for Rebecca, actually. If you could just, can you tell us, so the $5 million economic impact, can you sort of speak to what that means, like what's included in that estimate?
Right. Thank you, Mayor Given. And I will actually just call on, we have Lauren Levay on the line as well today, our Economic Development Officer. We have been fortunate with the realignment at the provincial level. Economic Development, Trade and Tourism has brought tourism in under their portfolio, and so that's given us a little bit more availability of data. So Lauren's actually been working quite closely with EDTT on putting together the scenario, and so she's got all the background information that will go into that for you.
There, good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Given and Council. Economic Development's been happy to work with Revolution Place on this. So with their estimates on what they've been reasonably able to attract with option 3. So this is based on multi-day conferences, about 3 to 5 a year, 4 to 5 additional arena shows, and then 8 to 10 shows in the bows, additional shows. And then, of course, as Catherine had alluded to, or Ms. Bridgeway, the additional capacity to potentially host large-scale events, so such as the Briar, and then also we had discussed the Jehovah's Witness Conference as well, was something that we currently can't host, but then looking into it, it was hosted in Medicine Hat, and the economic impact was 2.3. So we developed an assessment based on these events that they would be able to host above and beyond their existing events. And with Economic Development, Trade and Tourism, they have a system that they've recently utilized called Event Impact Calculator. And so with that, they've been able to run some additional reports for us and determine the economic impact of the additional events that they would be able to host. So the conservative estimate would be about $3 million, and then the higher estimate would be about $4.5 million. And then with additional events that would be more a one-off, so such as the Briar, large-scale multi-day conferences, that would be an additional about $3 to $5 million, but that wouldn't be on necessarily an annual basis. And that's all we have. So hopefully that.
Yeah, Lauren, can you speak to so that additional money is not revenue to the city. What does that additional economic impact actually mean?
Yep. So that is direct and induced economic impact. So things like transportation, rental space, retail, recreation, lodging, food and beverage services. So that would be economic impact on the city as a whole. So businesses, the spin-off of hosting the event in the city.
So it's essentially extra spending at local businesses.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions from council members? Okay, I don't see any. I'll take a point to say that in the old document that I dug out, the estimated cost at that time in 2002 was $13 million to do the whole meal deal. So it's, the observation that I would make is that the way that the facility is hampered by its current design hasn't changed. We have made some improvements over the years, incremental improvements to get us closer to it operating, but the main barrier to attracting more events and shows and more economic impact has always been the number of seats. And so we can do other things that would be positive for the functionality of the facility, and I would support that. But from the report and from the information that I've seen today and over the years, I don't see it as having that larger economic benefit to the community. The only way to do that is with the additional seats. I appreciate Catherine's suggestion. I see you, Councillor Friesen. I appreciate Catherine's. Sorry, I paused. I appreciate Catherine's suggestion that there may be some additional scoping that could be done. I don't think that it needs to be a Cadillac, but I think that the main thing of trying to get to 5,000 seats is what ultimately needs to happen at this facility for it really to meet its potential and to meet the community expectation. I'd be interested in what the scope would be or the cost would be if we did some of that design trade-off to really say what can we do that will generate the revenue that we want, the economic impact that we want, while minimizing the capital cost. And for me, the biggest thing is that there will be future councils that will deal with this. And I find myself sitting here today going, boy, I wish we would have approved the $13 million because that would have been paid off today. And the community also would have had the last nearly 20 years of entertainment and economic activities that renovation would have brought. I hope that there's not a council 20 years from now that says, boy, I wish that team in 2020 would have invested $40 million or $50 million because we would have enjoyed 20 years of economic benefit. Because now in 2040, we're looking at spending $250 million to build an equal facility. Because that just is how prices trend over time. So I'm supportive of a larger renovation. I would be open to it being value engineered, if that's the term, to get it down to something that is a bit more manageable. But ultimately, the facility revenue and economic impact won't improve by giving the Storm a couple of extra boxes and improving the entrance to the facility. It's just not going to do it, which is unfortunate. So there you go. There's my bit. Councillor Friesen, I did see you, even though I was frozen for a moment there.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm not sure how long to keep my hand up for acknowledgement. This is just all so weird, right? But anyway, thanks, Mayor Given. Thanks, Ms. Ridgway. I echo what you said. Phil, we need to have, ideally we would have enough of a change here that it shifts us into getting shows that we wouldn't get when we stay at this seat level that we are. And that's always been an issue. And we see it played out when larger shows are not coming here and they're, an hour away from us. And I would like to actually put out a motion if we're sort of ready for that we asking that we bring the full renovation matter forward to 2020 budget deliberations. Or 2021, I guess. So I'm open there. There may be some wordsmithing around that with specifics on parameters. My deal breaker really is the seating. And we're not going to get that without a large scale renovation. So whatever else happens around that is great. I'm Scottish on my father's side and would really like to do things in a really economical way. So I think, what did you say, value engineered or whatever that is? I'd really like to see us look at how can we get the biggest bang for our buck in this? But let's not be afraid to spend these bucks now. Because we're not going anywhere. To replace that building, we're certainly not ready for that. We may talk about a performing arts center, but that's apples to oranges. So it doesn't change, what may happen there doesn't really change what we do with this facility, in my opinion. So that's where I'm at. Thanks. I don't think he's fallen asleep.
I think Bill might have frozen up. So I'm not deputy mayor, but I'm just going to throw in my 2 cents. Actually, Eunice, I can support the motion to send it to 2020 budget. I don't know if my comfort level is there to approve the full scale renovation, and I don't disagree with you or Bill that in order to make Revolution Place a more profitable, expansive, and money generating, I guess that's profitable, experience for everyone, we need to do that full scale renovation. I don't really want to do compromises on if council decides on it, I don't want to compromise on the height of the roof. I know that'll save us some expenses potentially, but what I hear from being someone who set up shows at the Crystal Center before it was Revolution Place, being someone who has been in the entertainment industry and talked with different agents and various people in that community across the country, there is a common denominator that says that the acoustics just aren't there. Now, we put up some sound baffles and we tried to improve that, and we have, but it's minor. It's really tiny. And if we really want to draw those big money-making acts, we have to show them that their sound is going to be appreciated. And I think that comes with expanding the roof. So lots of time to think about it. I'm all for the discussion and debate and sending it forward to budget, so I can support this motion as it is. I guess there's going to have to be a really good case to make it happen, because there are a lot of significant priorities that are happening in our community. And I wasn't the only one during the last round of elections that said, hey, we got a lot of new big shiny buildings in this town. Do we need more at this time? There's lots of uncertainty happening in the global economy that will impact us. And the level of borrowing that's out there may or may not be available to us come budget time. I don't know. I'm sure it's always there. Banks always want their interest money, but there's a lot of money being loaned out to governments right now, and I don't know when we get to budget, if I'd be comfortable doing that, but definitely encourage the exercise. And I want to thank Ms. Ridgway for presenting this and her team and economic development. Lauren, thanks for that. And I'll just leave it open for anyone else to respond. I know I'm taking up a lot of words. Thanks, guys.
Okay, apologies, everybody had to sign back in. I missed that. I was on Councillor Friesen's motion last I heard. Thanks for whoever took over chairing. I did see Councillor Blackburn, though, with his hand up. I'm not sure if there's anybody else in the queue.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I have a hard time fathoming the financial aspects of this, but when I look at it from the perspective of what it is that the city might need and what might satisfy the people who live here, I think that the smaller renovation, although it would be a nice thing for those working at the Revolution Place to have the conveniences of those smaller renovations, I think what's going to affect the city as a whole is the larger renovation. I do agree that there would probably be some advantages to looking at whether or not it needs to be the full $55 million deal, or whether there is some compromises that might be able to be made that would make it a little more palatable. But in the long run, we do need Revolution Place to be something that is going to attract both entertainment and residents. we're under threat right now with the way that the economy is going and the way that the provincial government is treating medical professionals, that our community needs to be as attractive as we can possibly make it in order to have those professionals stay with us, those professionals and others. And the fact that we'll have the hospital opening, we would be at great risk, I think, if we didn't have enough medical professionals to be able to operate that regional hospital the way it should be operated. And I know that Revolution Place isn't going to be the only thing that helps us be successful with the hospital, but by the same token, it is one of those things that could be one of the major jewels in our crown in terms of making Grande Prairie an attractive place to live and work. And so I would certainly be in favor of Councillor Friesen's motion and further discussion and work towards succeeding at making that facility what it needs to be. Thank you.
You're muted, Bill.
I'm trying to use my spacebar trick and it wasn't working. Arlene, sorry, I had Councillors Bressie, O'Toole, and Palat. Arlene, though, I did have a request if you can share the motion as you have it now, just so we all know what we're discussing, what we're debating.
And that is what I have.
Okay, so that's what we have there. And Councillor Friesen, I don't know if you want to clarify your intent there because we have had some discussion. And I think it is important. It's obviously a substantial consideration. So we should be clear about what it is we're debating and what it is we're voting on, and that should reflect your intent. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Friesen?
Thank you, I will. I would only change perhaps the word the full-scale to a full-scale renovation project, and I think that opens it up for us to realize it's not necessarily exactly what was presented, but I know that administration has heard us today saying, like, you know, if we're going to do this, let's make sure we're doing it as reasonably as possible. And, you know, I agree with what Chris said about the fly space, and I think we have good bulkheads for the load and that sort of thing now, but there are some considerations still going forward that they're going to help us get the acts that we want here. Just the other thing that I had meant to say about putting it to the budget deliberations, I really hope that by the time fall comes around, we have a better sense of what's going to happen with entertainment in the future. I really hope that we get back to, there's nothing like being there for a concert or a show or whatever, and I really hope we can get back to that. But yeah, that one word change satisfies me before we put it to vote. So I'm not saying that that's what it needs to be. But.
So your intention being that administration has some flexibility to revise the scope downward if possible or if necessary.
Exactly. They've heard us. They're smart people. They're going to bring something that that we can get behind. I don't think they're going to, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Go back to the list. I had Councillor Bressie, O'Toole, and Palat.
Thank you. Not quite ready to share my thoughts yet because I need to get a bit more information, but a question that's maybe for Councillor Friesen, maybe for administration, or maybe for both is, if this motion passes, I don't know what so I guess my question for Councillor Friesen is the intent of when we discuss this at budget in November, the idea that administration's done the work of hiring a design firm, getting more solid information on what tenders would cost, and we're talking about we're do or die on pulling the trigger on this thing, or at budget is your hope that that's where we're talking about, are we going to spend the money doing that design work and doing that? So yeah, what are you hoping we're approving today, and what are you hoping we have as deliverables in November?
That's a really good question. I was thinking it'd be real nice to say we could pull the trigger on it, or put it to a particular year as the presentation to us stands. So I guess the question then for administration is how much more investment needs to be done in design work to be able to put a finer point on what the cost will be.
Sure. So I think that's a question for Ms. Ridgway. Or Arlen, you did reference that a first step would be the engagement of a cost consultant. Can you speak to that and how much does a cost consultant cost?
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I think we also have Lori Gaudette with us, and I think she was the one who, she has some knowledge on cost consultants, but maybe between her and Catherine. And then I think our intent would be to, to try to gather as much information as possible at the least amount of cost to really focus on the items that are really important, which is the 5,000 seats and the loading dock would be really advantageous as well, but I'll let them speak to it.
Yeah, Catherine and or Lori, do you want to give us a sense of what a cost consultant would add to this process and what we would need in terms of resources to get that expertise?
Certainly, thank you, Mayor Gibbon. The cost consultant would be needed if we were going to go full through with the actual project, the large project which you're talking about. If we're looking to get a Class B estimate type situation for you to be able to review at budget deliberations, we wouldn't need to go through with a cost consultant for that. It would just be if we were going to go forward with the actual design and construction. Just in my past, the cost consultant keeps it on track and makes sure that the change orders that come along with scope creep as we go through the project are addressed properly. But Catherine and I could work together to try and come up with an idea of how we could get you a better estimate for the deliberations in the fall. Okay, thanks for that clarity. So that sounds like to get those better estimates, it's not required to provide any additional resources at this time. I just want to be really clear about, because that's, I think, what Councilor Bress was asking. Yes, thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Just to clarify my interpretation of this, it appears that we've engaged design works to do this estimate so far. It's very high level and conceptual. I think if we're going to go forward with a better class estimate for you to consider, we would need to engage perhaps a design consultant to help us get to that point. So yes, more resources would have to be applied to this to get to that level.
So do you have a recommendation of how much that is? Because that sounded different than the first time, to be clear. Also, I see City Manager Galante has also come on, and Horacio, maybe you can give us a hand.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. So just to give a little bit of context in terms of a range, when we met internally as teams discussing the different options in the loading bay and what can be a trade-off, and perhaps Catherine, you can go further into details. But I just want to be sure that Council understands the range. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, we were talking between 55 million, and then when we started doing some potential trade-offs, we could potentially go down to 45 million. So that's an important number. So you have your floor and your ceiling. The details can be worked out for sure, potentially with Mr. McKay, as he's the brain behind the design, and he has been involved since the beginning of this process many years ago. But the range is there. So I think that will give Council more comfort as well for potential deliberations, because the money to be spent on a full renovation will be between 45 to 55 million. And Catherine, if you want to comment a little bit on what could be traded off within that $10 million range, I think that would be important for Council to hear. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Catherine.
Thank you. So that was the discussion that we were having about the roof in the bows side and the full 360 concourse level. So especially in the concourse, if we were just to eliminate that west side and just do the horseshoe, that would bring down the cost significantly, but it may not bring us to exactly 5,000 seats, maybe closer to the 4,500 range. Yeah, and those seats on that west end were retractable also, so they were pretty high tech on that west end.
Okay, so we've still got folks in the queue. Apologies, but I think important we get some clarity. We may want to consider giving administration a not to exceed number for budget, that they would be able to come back and tell us, okay, if we're not to exceed this amount, here's what we would recommend. And then council could consider whether or not we wanted to go ahead with that. That would be one way to go. Another way to go might be to talk about the components or features that are important to us and to explicitly identify those. You know, is it only 5,000 seats is, you know, do or die, it must have 5,000 seats? Or as Catherine suggested, you know, maximize the number of seats, you know, without doing the west renovation. And or, you know, in that mix is the conference abilities of the Bose side and Bose renovations. I think, so those would be the major things that would be different. I haven't heard anybody say that in a major renovation, a loading dock is optional, or that new entrance is optional. Like, I think that those are all assumed. I think that some of these other major features are things that would be, you do it or you know, or it gets left for another time. So my suggestion would be either talk about a maximum ceiling number that council is willing to consider, or talk about the features that are important, and we want to see what it would cost to build those features. Does that help? I apologize if there are people waiting. Councillor O'Toole and Councillor Plott, let's have you go with your comments if they're still relevant. Well, everybody gets a chance to think this over a bit.
So thanks, Bill. Just a question, Catherine. So we go ahead with the grand scale redo renovation. What's going to happen to the scheduled for the storm and any other possibility of holding acts in the place during renovation? So just as a guesstimate, or maybe you might know pretty close, how long is that renovation would take on a grander scale?
Thank you, Mayor Gibbons. Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. It's a great question. So to pull the trigger right now would be very difficult with the storm planning their season and everything else. So it would take some juggling. On the event side, though, right now we have a ton of holds. We don't have anything concrete. So if we do get the expectation that we are going to start this in 2021, 2022, we can start shuffling our schedule to make that work. Did I answer your question?
And how long would it take? Like, is it a 24-month process, or is it going to be a little shorter, a little longer, or do we have any idea?
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Gotten a lot of variation between, 12, 18 months to the 24 months. I think it all depends on how our appetite for phasing. I would prefer to see us just do it all at one time and get it over with, and that's been the recommendation I've been getting from other buildings that have done a similar renovation. But there is the opportunity to do some phasing if we wanted to keep some of our clients, especially our annual clients, happy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and just a comment, we are a winter city, and I would hate for not to have that free unloading, loading not part of the build. I think that's a mandatory thing. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this. So I would hate to lose that. As for the full 360, I would think that would be a plus, but I'm not heartbroken over if it doesn't go through because of a cost. But I think it would make it a better facility for people to walk around and get around. Just another question. This is kind of a silly one, but I bring it up all the time. is there going to be any increase in washrooms?
They were given, yes, there was an increase in washroom availability in the new plan. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Just like a question for Catherine as well on this. When this new, the $55 million dream, can you just tell me specifically how it impacts the Bose side? I think something to do with the kitchen and stuff maybe, but can you just walk me through what happened on the Bose side?
Okay, thanks, Mayor Gibbon. So there's a plan here. Mostly just an extension of the Bose into the east, and then it's adding the breakout rooms on that east end. It was also when we do the second level infill, it kind of fills in over top of the already existing lobby, and then it would bring the roof up on the Bose side to be the same height.
So just, I guess that on that, one of the questions I'd have, and it was brought up a little bit earlier, but I've always had this dream that the Performing Arts Center could go on that Bose side. It would be such a great fit for downtown. But if we were to, with the plan that you've got, that you spoke of there, how hard would it be to make that into a nice, maybe 1,500 seat Performing Arts Center on that side? Like, out of scope a little bit here, I realize, but like, how much more work would that take?
Very given. We could accommodate performing arts shows, and if the intent was to have more community events within the space, we can do that. To make it a full-scale performing arts with a sloped floor, and I guess it just needs to know how far you want to go as a performing arts center. We can accommodate performing arts acts or have the community rent the space and do their own community events, but to make it a true performing arts center would be quite a bit.
Okay.
But we can fill that need. Certainly we can fill that need. It's what the expectation is as far as a performing arts center, right? Yeah.
I appreciate it. Sounds like a conversation we have to have, or maybe a little friendly amendment on the motion here. Thanks for that, Catherine. Other than that, I guess for me, I'm struggling with this in general, unless I include the Performing Arts Center. I think if we were looking at the both sides, $5 million at the same time, and we could achieve an overall expansion of the Performing Arts Center, then I'm all for it. If not, I'd have a hard time with this this year. Just I'd like to see what happens with concerts. I'd like to see storms. I don't see what happens with conferences, because I'm hearing lots of things about that. That scares me a little bit moving forward. So $3.2 million, a lot of money could go a long ways in our community right now and other things. So I'm really struggling with that. So I wouldn't be able to support it unless it said it also was including the performing arts and it added maybe $5 million. I think if we could all encompass that one building, I could get behind that, because I think operationally that'll a lot be better for us than having potentially two facilities down the road. So if it was including that, great. If it doesn't include the performing arts center, I have zero appetite of promoting it of anything that's happened on Revolution State, which breaks my heart, because I think Catherine's doing a great job, but unless it includes both, I'm not interested.
Yeah. Just a sec, Councillor President. So I think Councillor Plott, really important to identify what a performing arts center is. I think there's some very specific design that goes with that. Catherine referenced sloped seating, and fixed seating. So I'm not. Well, I'll be blunt. I don't think they're compatible. You would not have the ability to host trade shows or conferences at Revolution Place anymore, because a performing arts facility is a very fixed, generally a very fixed facility that would not offer the flexibility that the flat floor space on the Bose side does today. So it would be, you would probably have, and Catherine can confirm or clarify from an actual operational perspective, but I think you'd actually reduce the number of event days that you'd be able to have in the overall facility by incorporating a performing arts center, because that type of facility is specialized and far less flexible in terms of what you can offer it for rental. So we wouldn't be able to rent it as much, to be really frank. And so we would have probably the same overhead and operational cost, but with less revenue coming in, because we'd have less days we could rent it.
So I'm a little bit confused again, I guess. I've been to performing arts cities, I've had concerts in them. I'm just I'm not understanding why we couldn't have a 1,500-seat beautiful performing arts center that could still host a ventriloquist and other acts on that side. And that's where I'm struggling a little bit is, maybe I don't fully understand a performing arts center. I don't know why we couldn't build a performing arts center that can facilitate other acts on the same side. That would be my hope. So we have one event center. That's where I'm struggling with. Spending $55 million for here, for me, pretty much puts a nail in a coffin for us ever having the ability to do a performing arts center. And I just want to be very clear that if we did this as a council, I think the appetite and the debt that would come with the performing arts center and the cost of operations would make it very unattainable for our community. So if we're ever going to talk about performing arts center, if it's not on the Vosges side, I don't know where it fits. And I'm really concerned about if it's not part of that conversation. I'd rather see if it's an $80 million project that's all there, then fine. But a $55 million one here that doesn't address that pretty much kills performing arts center for a community, in my opinion, because I just don't know how we'd ever take the debt on. So it really worries me that if that's something that's important to this council, it should be part of this RFP and this project.
Yeah. Councillor West, I did have you before we go to this performing arts side. I saw Councillor Blackburn had a hand up on the performing arts venue side, and I know that you've been one of the ones that's been most engaged on that project. So do you want to speak to your perspective on that?
Sure, thank you. I know we're getting off topic from the motion, but I think it's important to note that a performing arts center would really require a much different footprint than what the Vosges Center would offer us, because not only would there be the sloped floor and the stage and the requirement for a fly space over the stage, those kinds of things, but it also requires the workshop space for building sets. It requires the an additional smaller stage for supplementary types of activities that would be related with a performing arts center. There would be requirements for green rooms and change rooms and those kinds of things. Also, storage space for costuming and for props and all of those kinds of things. It's a much bigger requirement than just the stage and the seating for performances. I really think that although the location would be ideal in terms of where it is in the city, I don't think that the existing center would accommodate the footprint that would be required.
Catherine, did you have anything else from an operational perspective on the difference between performing? Like, I think I heard you say we could host ballet on the stage, or we could host theater productions, but it would not be a performing arts center with all those amenities that Councillor Blackburn talked about. Is that a fair way to characterize it, or how would you characterize it?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Exactly what Clyde was saying. Yeah, we can host the event, but for me, a performing arts center is more of a community space where, we teach about theater and there's a lot of community involvement. This would be more to put on the show. We can definitely do that, but to house the, rehearsals and all of the props and things needed for each show, it would be very limited.
Okay. Do you have with?
I guess at the end of the day, I'm just wondering, is this footprint big enough to do both? If this footprint's big enough to logistically do both, then I really want to push for that. I really don't see why it couldn't be, in my opinion, if we're willing to go vertical, but that's just my thought. Stagnated piece of land.
Councillor Plott, so I don't think it is. And I appreciate exactly what you said about, if we're considering making a significant renovation to this, that likely takes off the table the consideration of a performing arts center certainly in any sort of near or midterm. I think I'd agree with you. I think that's probably very, very true. And for me, it would come down to what is the most practical thing that has the best potential to increase the local economy and get used the most. So that's where, and so I'd be willing to make that trade-off. You're 100% right. I think that is a trade-off that we'd be making. Okay, there was a bunch of people that were waiting in the queue, or at least a few, and I know Councillor Bressie was there. Councillor Bressie?
Yeah, thank you. I've got one more question on process, and then I think I'm probably ready to start forming and sharing my opinion. And that is just, we're talking about this in an awkward time with the next municipal election coming up. And I really suspect that if we go ahead with this, this will be a heated election issue. I have no idea which way the successful candidates will go on supporting it or being against it, but I have a feeling this would be a heated election issue. And I want to set our next council up for success. I'd imagine that taking out the tens of millions of dollars of debt would fall on their shoulders, not our shoulders, which is unfortunate, but it might be the reality. We did that in a smaller term with the outdoor pool and the grandstands. But I'm wondering where the final decision point for this gets, where I'd imagine that if we did approve this in October, there probably would be one or more future decision points where we get designs back, or there's probably a final drop dead date. And I'm trying to figure out if that fits in this council term or in the next council term, just because I'd hate to see us invest a year and hundreds of thousands of dollars in work that then all of a sudden gets killed. So when would be a final, if this November, if we said, yep, we're approving it, it's in our short-term capital project, when would the actual drop dead date be for council to pull the rug away from this?
So I'm actually going to, I think that's more of an organizational one, and I'm going to ask the city manager to talk about that because we do have some delegated authority within the budget. And so can you talk about council's decision-making on a project like this at budget and what would happen from there to Councillor Bressy's question?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we move ahead and we include this project as part of November budget deliberations, you will see the financial impact of borrowing. So in this case, you know, with the floor and the ceiling we were discussing here, between 45 to 55 million, that will be probably a 2 to 2.5% tax impact for the next 30 years, just to service the debt, okay, just the cost of borrowing. So keep in mind that the target this council gave us pretty much goes between 0 to 2.5 for 2021. So that to service the debt, that's going to consume pretty much all the cushion we have for a potential tax increase, not only for 2021, but for the next 30 years. The other option that you may see in November is what kind of projects are not going to proceed as a menu of options. Projects funded by capital tax, for example. So we have about 10 or 11 million dollars on the budget with capital tax. So we may provide some recommendations if the decision from council is to proceed with this project. Then we may, we will show the financial impact of borrowing, which I briefly explained. Or the other option is not to do other projects or to postpone other projects to a certain point. Of course, when we're talking 30-year amortization, you can defer maintenance of assets and some projects to a point, but not for 30 years. So I'm envisioning this kind of a menu of different options on how to fund this project. Of course, the easy one will be borrowing, but then what projects could be delayed for a certain time to reallocate funding to fund Revolution Place renovation. So,
okay, but so that wasn't actually Councillor Bressy's question, though.
Well, you talk about
Councillor Bressy's question was, if council decided to go ahead with this, when would the ultimate decision be made, and what sort of check-in points were there? So at budget in November, council does if council doesn't vote to support it, then that issue is closed. If council does vote to support it, is that it for council touching it and the project comes back when somebody cuts the ribbon? Or, I think this is what Councillor Bressy was asking, are there other check-in points where council would have decision-making authority on whether the project goes forward or not?
Well, if the project is part of the approved capital plan, depending of council, if you want to be involved at any stages on the design, as happened on downtown phase 1, 2, and 3, where council was heavily involved on the design of the downtown because of selection of features like street lights and benches and pavers for sidewalks. As you may recall, we held multiple sessions and council was involved in picking different features of the project. That is up to council really to decide the degree of involvement on the project. For purely the process question, when it's approved on the capital plan, that's it. Then it's up to administration to run the procurement process and to award the tender. At some point will be a tender process, and if it's within the approved budget, there is no need for council for another touch point on that.
Okay, yeah. So Councillor Bresson, does that answer your question? Okay. Okay. Councillor Friesen?
Thank you. So I appreciate that this is still a really broad motion. So I'd like to suggest that we add to it, my points are, I think that we need to hit that 5,000. Can I just clarify, Ms. Ridgway, it seems to me that producers or promoters select venues or eliminate venues simply on seating. And is there a consistent cutoff that makes 5,000 seats that you know gets us in the eyes of more promoters than 4,500 seats? I think it seems to me that that's kind of one of those important benchmarks. Is that still the case?
Mayor Given, yes, you're absolutely right, Eunice. So some artists, especially higher up, put a cap on the type of arenas they will do. They will not even consider anything under 5,000 seats, just as a rule. Yeah. So thanks for that clarification, Ms. Ridgway. So I would absolutely put that then as a requirement, 5,000 seats. Beyond that, I'm open to whatever, how the chips may fall around that. I do believe that the loading dock and the change rooms, those sorts of things, that make sense to add in there. But I don't know if that's a hill to die on. For me, the only hill to die on is that seating. So I would certainly add that into my motion. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. So further specificity in the motion, asking administration to return with a full renovation project inclusive of total seating capacity of 5,000. That's your intent, Councillor Friesen? Okay. Okay. So some specificity there. Councillor O'Toole, I see you. Or was that just a flash?
Yeah. No. Thank you very much. So that's a minimum of 5,000 seats then. Okay. And if it works out that we get another 100 out of that, that's not a problem. But minimum of 5,000 seats. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not saying exactly 5,000.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yeah, Councillor Bresson.
Yeah, thank you. I can't support this motion. I hope that committee won't support this motion either. And for me, this is a huge decision for our community. This is a lot of money. We've talked about the tax, either the tax impact or the significant impact on other operational items carrying this debt will have. This is something that, with the debt we're taking out, it probably makes that performing arts center never happening or not happening for decades. And not just that, but probably other significant projects in the city that we might consider probably get taken off the map. I think that when we're talking about investing tens of millions, I don't think, when we're talking Revolution Place, I don't see that as an investment in just Revolution Place. I see that as an investment in our entire downtown city center, which maybe is the argument in favor of passing this motion, but at the same time, I think that we don't have a holistic view of the downtown city center and what we're going to do with that. And that's $55 million being spent on this one part of our city center that can't be spent elsewhere. I just think for so many reasons, this is a huge decision. And I think that it really does need a process for very robust public consultation and public debate. And I recognize that council gets to make the decision at the end of the day, but I think that there does need to be a lot of runway for the public to see different options and have a say. And is it important we have the full bowl, or will we compromise on that? Do we need to make significant investments to the both sides, or are we just interested in the bare bones 5,000 seats? That's all we want. I think that when it's a decision this big, the public has a right to that. And if I had my way, if we were going forward with this, I'd actually make this a ballot measure the next election, and maybe it's a way for us to steal back some of the municipal bandwidth that the provincial government's trying to take away from us with their referendums. But that would be the most extreme form of public engagement. But even if we don't go that far, I think that the public has a right to weigh in. And I also think that where we are in our election term, this has very significant bearings on the next council. And I really think that this is probably something that I think they should be making the decisions on, whether that's looking at a ballot measure or just running a normal old campaign where this is an issue and they make a decision on it. I think it's their decision to make, not ours. And so if we're going to advance a public engagement process, or if we're going to advance, hey, bring us a few options so that we can set the election conversation up well and the next council up well to make a decision, I could support that. But just the idea of us approving this in October with no plan for public engagement and put this on the next council's lap, I'm very uncomfortable with that. So I can't support this motion as is, and I hope that committee won't support it either. At the same time, I'm open to other ways to advance this conversation.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. I'll just say that the motion as it is, I support the motion. Another component that I think is important for the benefit to the community to really be realized is the conferencing ability on the Bose side. So I don't know if that is something, Councillor Friesen, that you'd be willing to include or not, but it's certainly something that I would like to see included, so that administration can do that work to see if it's possible to get that in there. Councillor Friesen, if you're not comfortable to include that, then maybe I would ask if there'd be a council member that would amend to have that in there. I'd like to be able to consider that at budget time. So, Councillor Friesen, do you have a feeling about that part?
Yeah, and I would be happy to include that. I think that's an important exploration in addition to. So, yeah, conferencing capability on the Bose side.
Okay, good. So I'm, with that, I'll speak to the concerns Councillor Bressie raised. We're elected to a 4-year term. We make lasting decisions just about each and every day. And yes, it's not often that this council has faced significant budget and borrowing decisions like this. But don't make any mistake. Every time we change the municipal development plan, allow developers some flexibility, we are saddling future councils with the impact of our decision. That's the job of council. That's what we do all the time. And we need to think about our decisions that we're making in the now, in the context of the future, and whether it offers benefits or not to the community. And that's why we vote for or against things. I think it's reasonable to say that the community should have some view in this, and I would maybe debate that about timing and everything else. That's not an unreasonable point. For me, the thing that I think that we need to be committed to is continuing to do our job that we're elected to do, which is make decisions about the future of this community. And we're elected to do that for a full 4 years. And again, I'll do this part about sort of being the historian. I have been on councils that have decided not to do projects, and Eastlink Center is the major one. The council of the day was close, within a couple of months of awarding the tender for the construction of that project, and decided not to, and it was absolutely an election issue. And everybody that got elected in that version, everybody that got elected was committed to doing the project. It just ended up costing more because of the delays. And so the project still got built. It just took over a year extra of time to do it, so the community was deprived of a year of benefit and had to pay more for it. And so that's at least one experience that I've had with the council saying, well, hold on, we better defer this decision. I think we're a place where we're over a year away from an election. And I think that's more than enough runway to have some good community discussion about this, certainly between now and November. And if council members felt that that wasn't enough and couldn't support it on that basis, then fair enough. But I'm not willing to close up shop and say that the last over a year, more than 12 months of this council term are off limits for making decisions that impact the future of our community, because that's what we do each and every day when we get together. So yeah, I want to push back on that point, or at least give you an option to consider that about the context of all of the different decisions, in spite of the fact that this is one of the most significant money ones that we've seen. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I guess what saddens me about this conversation is I think there's a lot of us that have been wanting to talk about the Revolution Place for a long time. And then COVID happens and here we are, boom, let's hurry this thing up and move it. And that's for me, that's where my stomach is like, why are we reacting right now on the conversation we haven't had about a $55 million project without talking to the community, even as a council? Here we are in a quick Zoom meeting, let's figure this out and let's get this to budget and let's hurry it up at budget time. Because if this was that big of a priority for this council, shouldn't this conversation have come up a little bit earlier for us to spend $55 million? I've been asking, I've been pushing for this conversation. I've wanted this conversation. I've been bugging Catherine about this because I wanted it. I want to have this conversation so bad, but at the same time, to just rush it to council to get it to maintenance budget and spend the money, it just doesn't feel right. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if COVID wouldn't have happened. And that's what saddens me. If this was a priority, it should have been discussed about before. It's a priority because of COVID, or let's figure out something new. We all want to help. We all want to do things right now, which I totally get. And it's hard sitting in this. But thinking that this decision, rushing to council this fall, is the right decision, I really ask you to each check your guts on why we're talking about this suddenly now, when it wasn't a discussion 3 months ago, and a $55 million impact and a 30-year impact for our community. So I can support it. I won't support it at the fall either. And I 100% agree with Councilor Bessie. This is a massive project for our community, and they should be consulted about it. It shouldn't just go to committee this fall, council this fall, we just set a budget, sure, and boom, $55 million disappears. So I don't like it. To my core, I think this is just wrong, and this conversation hasn't been bigger if we're going to spend that kind of money.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Plott. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I can appreciate where Councillor Plott is coming from in terms of feeling that maybe it's a rush, but I don't see it as a rush. It had to come up at some point, and now that it has come up, it's something that what we're asking for is enough information to be able to debate it more fully at budget deliberation time, and even at that point, we don't necessarily have to say, yeah, let's get this started next year. It's something that we have the opportunity to look at further down the line in our capital planning as well. The other thing that I wanted to just mention briefly is that, yes, committing this kind of money is going to put off for a while the ability to do another major project like a performing arts center. But it's hard to see because of the doldrums that we're in, but this city has a track record of rapid population growth in good times. And I really do think that it would be sooner than one might expect that the population would grow to the point where we have the capacity to add what's been called another shiny new project. So I don't think that we ought to be as much afraid of this decision, the effects that this decision would have on our future ability to grow. So I'm still in favor of at least getting the opportunity to look at the specifics during budget deliberations. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I think we can reject it in November when it comes, if you don't agree with it. But I don't think there's anything wrong to get this going ahead, and I'm favor to this, and I understand where Mr. Dillon coming from and Wade. I agree with a lot of points, but with my experience in the past of being a councillor, and I think Bill and Clyde, you guys clearly said good things. That if I'm I'm not wrong, that East Link was started with 70 million, and 3 years later it cost us $110 million to manage and plus. And so if we're going to delay 2 more years waiting for the next council, it's probably going to be 75 million if you're going to do that renovate. The same thing earlier, Bill said, if they spend $13 million about 10 years ago, that could be happy today and not spending 55. It could be 55, could be 40. We have to look into what it cost and then we go from there. So I'll support this motion right now as it is.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Minhas. Any other discussion or debate? If there's not, then I think we should get one more clarification of exactly what we have on the floor now for a motion. Arlene, can you clarify for that for us?
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. The motion on the floor is committee refer a full-scale renovation project for Revolution Place, inclusive of total seating capacity of a minimum of 5,000 seats and enhanced conferencing capability on the both side to the 2020 fall budget deliberations.
Thank you. I don't. Am I closing now? Thank you. So I'm hopeful that council will approve this motion. And between, I've heard, you know, every argument I hear, I have just a moment during that argument when I go, oh, geez, they're right. So I do have the greatest deal of respect for everything that I've heard, and rebuttals for a couple. You know, this, Councillor Platt, this may seem like a suddenly new idea, but the fact is this has been circling since 2003, and it keeps coming back. And if if this council isn't bold enough to make a good decision on this with the experience we have under our belt, you know, there were things early this term that we said, you know, we need more information, let's wait. And there are also, we make the argument that this isn't a decision that we should put forward to a brand new council next term. So at some point, we have a council of any given day has to make the decision, where the decision, own the decision, yes, but the decision has to be made. And there are many decisions that we make, even at our regular council meetings, that have consequential impact for years to come, and including some unintended consequences that do come up. And we get to deal with those that were made before us, of decisions that were made before we got here. And there's, you know, we're kidding ourselves to think that every decision that we can make is going to set up future councils for perfection. No, what we do is the best that we know today with the information we have today, considering all of the likely consequences in the future, including the fact that this issue isn't going to go away. It's been here since 2003. The limiting factors of Revolution Place. We recently did the facility review, and I tried to find it here and wasn't successful, but it seems to me there's 30 years more of useful space in this particular facility. So let's do the best that we can with it. It would be fun, great to have a wonderful performing arts center, but it's not going to happen there, you know, unless we ditch the arena side and incorporated that in the footprint. Maybe we could do something there, but then we have to look at now, what do we do for an arena? So if and when we look at a performing arts center, I don't see that as a city consideration. That's a regional impact. And when that conversation comes, I'm really hopeful that that will be a regional conversation. In the meantime, let's make a reasonable decision about what we have before us today. And, you know, why didn't this come to us sooner? Well, I'll tell you what, when we started on council, our term, we had a brand new manager at Revolution Place who was kind of getting his feet under him. And that manager is no longer there. We have now a new manager with some history who's gotten her feet under her a little more quickly than someone brand new from outside. And therefore, we're hearing about this now. This isn't put before us because of COVID. It is put before us coincidentally during this crisis. And it's ours to look at now. And I hope that we take the time over the next few months, have some public engagement as we certainly are able to do between now and when we talk about this at budget time in the fall. But let's sit down and talk about it at budget time. Please approve this, vote in favor of this motion today, and let's get the information that we need and the engagement done that we need to really make a decision about it in the fall. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. So with that, we will close. We'll call for the vote on the motion to refer to budget. I see Councillor Blackburn camera is live, but has just exited. Councillor Blackburn, are you there? Okay, there you go. Thank you. So we'll call for the vote on the motion. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, and all those opposed? Okay, so I don't have a vote from you, Councillor Blackburn. And I can't hear your audio right now. Okay, so I will call first for all those in favor. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. And all those opposed. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. Apologies, Councillor Blackburn. I see that you're having a challenge with your audio in. Thank you. I see Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. Well, then I think the next conversation that I want to have is what our expectations are in terms of public engagement and giving the public a say in this. I think that if we're going to have this very significant conversation in October, I'm not comfortable with it just being the informal who we bump into in our day-to-day lives as councillors and who reaches out to us. Like there'd be something more intentional. So I'm not sure if Director Burke's on the phone call. Awesome, there's the first I was looking for. I guess two questions for you, but my first one is just if you don't get any specific direction from council today, I understand that you might not have a full answer yet, but what do you think engagement might look like on the cities and if you don't get any specific direction from council today?
Thank you, Mayor Given. If we have no specific direction, this would be rolled into our regular budget engagement, so it would be referenced in some of the things that we're doing throughout the next few months. If council was looking for something more robust, we would take some direction on that, and I would also suggest, as this is unplanned and it is, I would say, graphics heavy, that we would assign some budget from a source to support this. One source of funding, if this was a council priority, there is some funding left in Council Strategic Initiative Fund that we could put a dollar value on. I have some thoughts, but I without thinking of a full plan, I'm a little bit hesitant to put a dollar. The resources and the manpower, and I don't think we would need extra resources. It really would be in producing some materials and some events. Particularly in the time of COVID, I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Great. So then the second question I was going to ask is, I'm thinking about a motion, and I'd love to hear your perspective if this is reasonable. And the motion I was thinking about making was to ask you guys to bring to an August 4th standing committee meeting options to undertake public engagement on Revolution Place. And the expectation there wouldn't necessarily be that you've gone through the whole process to do a written report. Those are always nice, but if the timeline's too tight for that, I'd respect that. But I'd love to have this conversation at the first opportunity. Also appreciate you need some time to go talk to your people. So I'm wondering if August 4th would sound like a reasonable deadline to you if I made a motion.
Mayor Given, my preference would be that it just referenced an August committee meeting without going and speaking with people. We had planned vacations around break as well as council, and I'm just I'm not quite confident to say we could have something prepared for August 4th and with CLT review as well. So if it was August, I will strive for early August, but it's August, I can meet that deadline.
Sure. Well, if I may make a motion then, Mr. Mayor. I would move that committee direct administration to bring a proposed plan for public engagement on Revolution Place to an appropriate August standing committee. And yeah, I think that if it's possible to do that on August 4th, so we can really hit the fall running, we've got a tight timeline on here, so it'd be great seeing August 4th, but I'd also way rather have a good job than a rush job without the resources you need. So thank you for the advice. Yeah, and that's the motion I want to make.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Bressy. That motion's in order, obviously, and appreciate and acknowledge you asking for the advice of administration on what their capacity is and how to best go about that. Any discussion or debate on Councilor Bressy's motion? I don't see any. And Councilor Blackburn, I don't see you on screen in terms of being able to vote on this. Councilor Bressy, would you like to close on your motion?
No, I think it stands for itself. Thank you.
Okay. Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of Councilor Bressy's motion for direction to administration? Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. Is there any other business for Council Committee of the Whole today? Not seeing any. Then I guess we will call our meeting adjourned. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you. Thanks.